Hello, everyone. My name is Azira Hashim. I'm from the University of Malaya in Malaysia, and I research and publish on English in Southeast Asia and ASEAN, higher education in ASEAN, language policy, and multilingualism. For today's talk, I will be presenting on English as an ASEAN lingua franca, and I will be talking about, firstly, the background to Southeast Asia, historical and socio-political. I will talk about the development of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. I will then talk about English in Southeast Asia, talking about regional features and also English as a lingua franca. I will focus on the development of a regional angle of English, arguing that national varieties are bound together by regional features across languages, and that common features are found in English as ASEAN, in English as a lingua franca in ASEAN. This is a map of Southeast Asia and ASEAN. You can see that the region actually extends over a large maritime continental area. There's diversity in demography, religions, and languages. The continental part is situated on the east coast of the Bay of Bengal, on the one hand, and the west coast of the South China Sea on the other. It's a considerable landmass south of China, with countries with countries such as Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Singapore. Further south, in the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, there's a chain of several thousand islands comprising from west to east Indonesia. Further east, another chain from north to south, the Philippines. Indonesia's largest island is Sumatra, in the west, then Java, and a series of smaller islands eastwards, and then Borneo with East Malaysia and Brunei is situated in the north of Java. East Timor is at the eastern tip of the island of Timor, acquired independence from Indonesia in 2002. So politically, there are 10 countries that belong to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, except for East Timor. And I will treat Southeast Asia as a geographical and geopolitical term for the 10 countries, and ASEAN as its contemporary geopolitical term for the region. Just as a little bit of background, Southeast Asia comprises of a population of over 600 million people in the 10 countries. They've all been colonized or actually been influenced by a number of countries throughout its history: Portugal, the Netherlands, Spain, Britain, USA, Japan, India, China, Arabia, and the Middle East, and all of them have left their traces, especially their languages. So it's not surprising that the region has got a tremendous amount of multilingualism. Today, you can say that English is the most powerful external language in all the countries. The role of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, has played a big role in this, and it has actually led to the rise of an ASEAN ELF. Throughout the region, you can find diversity that carry over into its linguistic habitats. The region's complex history can be described as a sequence of interactions of local players with external powers. There have been Indian kingdoms, Muslim sultanates, colonial trading outposts from the 16th century, exploitation colonies from the 18th century. China was another external player with strong interest in the northern part. So the whole region actually has had a lot of influences. It was a major trading network between the 7th and 17th century. It was a country where you had exchanges of political systems and power, goods and services, cultures and religions, languages and people. There was a considerable level of language contact and changes taking place in the region. And today, Southeast Asia is more than just a transit region. It's a geopolitical entity pursuing its own priorities. And a lot of research has been carried out looking at the growth and current status of English within different national environments, and also more recently, in relation to the developing regional or ASEAN context. So English came into contact with a number of different languages in different parts of the region. It has borrowed from several languages in former colonies and assimilated words as well. Many of them are found in etymological dictionaries, such as the OED. So words have been borrowed, new lexemes have been created in and across varieties of English, with linguistic influences that have come from Europe, from China, from India, and from the Middle East. New varieties of English have emerged in the different countries, developed into established ones, especially in the former Anglophone colonies. And during the post-colonial period, English contact-induced varieties have become especially vibrant. So within the national varieties, there are loans from local languages that are commonly found and can be considered the most obvious contact phenomena. And loans have been found, common loans have been found across national varieties as well in the region. The Southeast Asian nations, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, that was formed in 1967. It consists of 10 countries. It started with an initial 5, and then it actually gradually admitted all the other members. The working language of ASEAN is English, and it was actually stated in the ASEAN Charter in Article 34 that the working language of ASEAN shall be English. So it's the language that's used in all the ASEAN meetings. It's a language used in several domains in the region. And it was considered a language of pragmatism. But ever since we became an ASEAN community in 2015, there's been a lot of regional community efforts taking place. There's more and more interactions. There's more and more mobility and intra-regional exchanges. So therefore, there is evidence to show that actually it's becoming a language that actually promotes solidarity as well. A lot has happened actually in the region over the last so many years. English has played more and more of an important role in the education systems. So it's not just in the former Anglophone colonies that English is a very popular subject. In all 10 ASEAN countries, it's actually a very important language, foreign language in education. It's a compulsory subject in the primary curriculum in all schools in ASEAN. It's the most important foreign or second language in all ASEAN countries. It didn't used to be in the past. There was French, there was Russian, there were other languages. And there's always been the issue of medium of instruction. Should it be in English or should it be in the national language? For example, the shift in policy in the teaching of mathematics and science in Malaysia. It was Malay for many years after independence. It switched to English for several years, and then it switched back to Malay again in 2012. So English is used throughout the region in official meetings. As I mentioned earlier, it's the language of ASEAN meetings. It's very much found in popular music, in culture, in sports, and in the media. And the push for English has also been spurred by international agencies like the World Bank that usually request for English-speaking partners in any of their programs. I will now talk about some of the features that you find in national varieties and some of the common features that you find across varieties of English in ASEAN. So the varieties of English that have been well researched would be the Malaysian variety, the Singapore variety, the Philippine variety, and the Brunei variety, where English has very much been the second language in the country. There's been two trends, both moving away from native speaker norms. There's the development of stable national varieties, especially in the former Anglophone colonies, which I've just mentioned. And also, I think it's been noticed that there's a rise of common features and of the spread of some others across the region, and that points to the possibility of a consensual variety of English. In the description of varieties of English, researchers have spoken about unique phonological grammatical features, Recent research has talked about common ones across different varieties. So features, for example, like absence of the schwa vowel, the monophthongization of diphthongs, the shortening of long vowels, the reduction of final consonant clusters, the shift in stress placement and syllable time rather than stress time. So these are features that have been described in some of the varieties of English, and they are also actually found in the English spoken by ASEAN speakers when they get together. So these are some features that have been found in varieties, and they're also noticed in ASEAN as English as an ASEAN lingua franca. The non-standard use of plural forms for uncountable nouns, for example, the use of irregular plural, a tendency to use plural form for uncountable nouns, like, for example, like equipments, informations, luggages, yeah. And speakers often find that the system of question tags in British English, in standard British English, is extremely difficult, and that's often replaced in one or several ways in Southeast Asian varieties. And there's quite a bit of work which has been done on this already. We turn to look at loans in Southeast Asian Englishes. A lot of work has been done on loans in the different varieties of English in the region. There's been loan words borrowed from Chinese dialects, for example, loan words from Malay and Malay dialects, loan words which have been taken from East Malaysian languages. So some of them are found only in the national varieties. They are unique to the national varieties. Some of them have actually spread to other national varieties, which have a similar composition of people in the country. So there are loans like the word ang pao, which is red packets with money given during Chinese New Year. Loans like kampong, which is hometown, coming from Malay. Madrasah is a Malay word which is borrowed from Arabic. That is a common word in Malaysia. It's also used in Brunei. So these two countries have got a Muslim majority population. It is also a common word in Singapore that has a population of perhaps about 10% of Malay Muslims. Pawang is a Malay word that's also found in the English in Malaysia and Brunei. Teh tarik is a kind of tea. It's borrowed from Malay in Malaysian English. It's also found in Singapore English as well. There are also loan translations which may have started in Malaysia but are also found in Malaysia, in Brunei and Singapore. God willing is a common loan translation of inshallah, yeah, and usually used to prefix a statement of positive intent or aspiration. It's a very common word in Malaysian English, in Brunei English, also in Singapore English. So words like borrowed for food, festivals, people, martial arts, traditional Chinese arts, for example. Kailan is a Chinese word for vegetable. Ama is a word for domestic helper. Tai Chi, which is quite commonly known, a kind of martial arts. Then compound blends such as Kway Teow soup, which is a soup dish. Chinese Xianxei, which is a Chinese medicine man. And Ang Pao packets, which are red money packets given during Chinese New Year. And they're also given during Ramadan, during the Muslim festival after Ramadan, but instead the packets used are green packets then. Other examples, the word kiasu is a very common word originating from Singapore, characterizing the negative Singapore trait of being very competitive. It's an import from Singapore English, borrowed initially from Hokkien to describe this particular attitude. But it's made its way into Malaysia. It's made its way into Brunei with its Hokkien etymology, but it still remains closer to Chinese ethnicity than the other ethnicities in the country. In the Philippines, Gonzalez has written about a variety of English which he calls Hokkaglish, which also borrows a lot of Chinese words, a lot of words from Hokkien. It's an English hybrid, but it has a relatively small English mixing and mostly Chinese words. So that also has been actually researched in Philippine English. Another noticeable trend is the use of Arabic in Englishes in Southeast Asia, especially in Muslim majority countries. It is very noticeable in Malaysia. It is also very noticeable in Brunei and Indonesia, and you can find it in Singapore as well. So Arabic actually has long been in the region. It was a former trade and migrant language. It's always been a religious language. It has had influences ranging from the classical to the colloquial and the dialectal spheres. In Malaysia and Brunei, it's been found with the Jawi script for the Malays. It's used in Islamic context. So Arabic has influenced orthography, it's influenced pronunciation, word formation, grammar, pragmatics, and discourse. So Arabic loan words today are strongly connected with Islam. It is becoming quite trendy actually to use Arabic words in English. And therefore it leads to the creation of an Arabic Islamic layer of English in countries that have a majority or significant minority of Muslims. So you find Arabic words, the same ones being used in countries like Malaysia, in Brunei, Indonesia, and Singapore. So some research has been carried out on the Arabic layer in Southeast Asian Englishes, and questions asked about this new dimension to the texture of English, and is it integrative across national Englishes? However, if you look at the use of Arabic in English within a country, a study that was carried out some years ago found that the Arabic words were, of course, more known among the Malay speakers in Malaysia, less known by the Chinese and Indian communities. So although it's used quite a lot in the media, in speeches, we ask the question, is it divisive inside an individual country? Brunei is a Malay Islamic monarchy, and therefore the Arabic layer is commonly found. It's also a former British protectorate. So there are many Arabic lexical items which are frequently used in Brunei English. So similar to Malaysia, common words that denote Islamic religious concepts and practices can be seen. So you've got examples such as Sharia Advisory Committee, Takaful, IBB Berhad, Doa Al-Fatiha was read, followed by the breaking of fast and Maghrib prayers. And this is also commonly found in Malaysia. There's been considerable amount of research on Islamic financial services. Lots of technical Arabic terms. Very often we come across the term Sharia compliant. It's a frequent technical hybrid for products that follow Sharia regulations. In terms of insurance in the country, takaful is commonly used. It's an Islamic insurance. It designates a form of insurance based on the Quranic principle of mutual assistance. Sukuk is also commonly used. It's a financial certificate similar to a conventional bond, with the difference that it is asset-backed. So these are words which are very common now in countries, especially with a Muslim majority population. Words like takaful are discussed in relation to a number of other words denoting Islamic concepts. For example, in this particular text, we've got under Sharia law, conventional insurance is prohibited due to the elements of gharah, masir, riba in its implementation. Instead, takaful was introduced in order to ensure that takaful operates within Sharia law. A takaful contract is developed based on the concept of tabaru. The types of contracts that can potentially be used include those created based on the principles of hibah, wakaf, sadaqah, etc. So sometimes the translations are given in brackets. Sometimes it is assumed that the readers actually know what the Arabic words mean. I now turn to English as an ASEAN lingua franca, looking at some examples of spoken interaction between speakers who come from different countries within ASEAN itself. And some of my examples are taken from a publication in 2016 that focused on particles and interjections. And here I focus in particular on the particle la, or sometimes spelled as LAH, and interjections aiya, aiyo, and wa. So I will focus on these in my discussion on English as an ASEAN lingua franca. There's been quite a bit of discussion on this topic. Discussion on when English is spoken by people from ASEAN, coming from different ASEAN countries, when they meet. Is it just a collection of different national varieties that they use at home, or does it possess characteristics that make the term ASEAN English a useful, even necessary one? So in this particular research, we looked at what features actually are used by ASEAN speakers, by almost all different ASEAN speakers, to indicate actually that there's a bond that they share among themselves. It's often been said that English is a language of pragmatism in ASEAN, that it is used in meetings, it is used for functional reasons, but our data and our analysis indicates there might be a development that shows that there is actually common features used, and that the features used are actually bonding elements that create solidarity among the speakers who come from all the different ASEAN countries. So the data that I have here, it's actually from a project on the Asian corpus of English, which data that was collected some years ago, and that there's a corpus actually that consists of data that came from several countries in the region. So here, as I mentioned, firstly, the particle la, it's a distinctive feature. It's been well researched. There are lots of articles on this particular particle. It's found in both Malaysian and Singapore English. And in our data, we find that it's also used by speakers from other ASEAN countries in their conversations with one another. So several speakers that Malaysians and Singaporeans use when they speak in an English settings would be me or lo or or ho, ma and le. Yeah? So these are all particles that are found in casual settings. And it's been often said that the particle la is the most salient of them all. And I would say that it's the most well-researched particle in the list that we have here. For example, Wong, as far back as 1983, said that it's the most well-known particle in colloquial Malaysian English. Balancer in 1983 says that it's a stereotype of Singapore English. So there's been a lot of work done on this particular particle. The origin has been attributed mainly to Chinese languages, such as Hokkien, Cantonese, yeah. According to various researchers from a few decades ago. It's widespread, as I mentioned, in all the different ethnic groups, originally from Chinese dialects, but widespread among all ethnic groups in both Malaysia and Singapore. Typically, it occurs in phrase or sentence final position. Typically, it usually indicates emotive, affective attitudes of speakers. It often functions to emphasize, to convey an informal style, to signal intimacy, to persuade, to deride, to wheedle, to reject, and so on, according to Wong in 1983. This is one particular example which we obtained from the Asian Corpus of English. It's data that was collected in Malaysia, and it's a small group of speakers who come from different ASEAN countries speaking together. And in this particular text, none of the speakers are from Malaysia or Singapore. They come from different ASEAN countries. They come from Thailand, Myanmar, and from Vietnam. And you'll see that the particle la is used quite often here by all the speakers. We have, yes, doctor, you want some more? Try la. I mean, this speaker one is trying to actually persuade the other speaker to try some food that they have at lunch. And somebody says it's not spicy. And then in another text, they were talking about transport of some equipment or material. And somebody says, maybe by ship lah, I think, indicating that she's not too sure what the transport form is, indicating actually possibly it's by ship, but she's not very sure. And then in the third text, they're talking about buying an item, and then speaker one says, yeah, mostly expensive or something. And then speaker 4 says, it's up to you lah, it's my first time. Huh? So creating emphasis as well, saying that, it's up to you if you want to buy that particular item. So in this particular text, speakers are actually not from Malaysia or Singapore, but the particles that have always been found in Malaysia and Singapore English are also used by the speakers here. In this example also, we've got another group of speakers, no Malaysians and no Singaporeans either. Again, the use of the particle la. You have Filipino, Vietnamese, and Indonesians talking. Yeah, so the second speaker says, "Okay lah, remove it lah." Showing emphasis. This is what you have to do. And then in the next text, the person from S2 again from Vietnam says, "Oh yeah, it's the same with Vietnam," showing emphasis, putting the particle at the end of the statement. And then you have also other examples of la by the other speakers. All these, the foreigner la, emphasizing the statement. And then speaker 2 at the end also says, so you create from this book lah, so all of them are using this particular particle. So it's become actually a particle that's found actually in the conversation of all ASEAN speakers in the data that we have. It's no longer just actually unique to Malaysian and Singapore English, but it's found in all, it's spoken by all speakers when they come together in a particular setting. Okay, then move on to the use of interjections. So interjections are found actually in also the interactions of people from different ASEAN countries. These are actually interjections which have been described in Malaysian and Singapore Englishes. They're commonly used in Malaysia, commonly used in Singapore by all ethnic groups, originating perhaps first from Chinese dialects, yeah, but they're used by all ethnic groups. But in this particular data, we found that the 3 interjections, aiya, aiyo, wa, yeah, they're all forms of emotional expressions, and they also contribute to the emotive value of ELF. Yeah, so aiyo and aiya, they're both interjections originating from Chinese dialects, according to research. Generally, they express negative feelings associated with displeasure towards a person, an incident, or a situation. There have been people who have distinguished between these two as well, that these interjections are actually also quite different. So interjections actually express the speaker's feeling more immediately than words can actually describe such feelings. So they're commonly used in the Malaysian English variety, but we find that they are also commonly used in interactions between ASEAN speakers. So here is a text, interactions between 3 speakers who actually come from different countries. You have a Vietnamese, a Thai, yeah, and somebody from Myanmar. Yeah? So you have the use of, in this particular case, you've got the use of aiyo, interjection aiyo, which is used by all the speakers. So here the first one, here they're talking about leave, which is available. They're all working in Malaysia. They're all teachers working in Malaysia, coming from different ASEAN countries. So the first part of the text, they're talking about leave. And then S1 says, every year they add up 1, right? And then S2 says, yeah, correct. And S1 says, I have only 15 days, yeah? And then she used aiyo, so sad, no? Because she's expressing that she's feeling very sad that she's only got 15 days of leave. And she's saying that to someone else. And both of them actually are not from either Malaysia or Singapore. The next text you've got S2 saying, so you have to wait until the rain stops. And S1 says, aiyo, how can you wait until now you know that the rain going to stop or not? So here is also S1 is expressing his or her feelings by using the interjection aiyo as well. Expressing, actually, I suppose the speaker is expressing some impatience that they have to wait for the rain to stop before they're able to go back. And then further, the next extract, they're talking about being hungry. So S1 says, my God, I'm so hungry. And S3 mentions sometimes you're hungry. And then S1 says fruit sometimes aiyo, yeah. So here that they're talking about feeling hungry. And then I think they were having a conversation and they were talking about other things, but S1, who is actually Filipino, yeah, after several turns, she still went back to the interjection aiyo to express that she's actually very hungry on account of having missed her breakfast, yeah. And then the last text there, we've got S2 saying, yeah, I got 5 cents. S1 says, why cannot? And S3 says, no need 5. And yeah, 5 cents also want to give. And then A says, wait. So here actually, the person using the interjection is a Bruneian. And she's probably indicating some annoyance that the other speaker is actually wanting to give a 5 cents change or waiting for a 5 cents change to be given back. Yeah? So you can see that in these extracts, all speakers are actually speakers from different ASEAN countries, but using interjections which are commonly found in Malaysian and Singapore English. And then the final interjection here is interjection wa. Yeah, this is an interjection which we use all the time in Malaysia, also in Singapore. It's an exclamation usually used at the beginning of sentences. It's used to express admiration or awe or consternation or surprise. Yeah, and it's been also described in a dictionary of Singapore English. So while aiyo and aiya express negative feelings associated with displeasure, wa actually generally conveys positive feelings on the part of the speaker. So origins have been speculated to be from Chinese languages. Association is with Malaysian and Singapore colloquial Englishes. So this has also been found. In fact, all three have been adopted by English speakers in their conversations in the data that we have. Okay, so this text actually shows the use of interjection wa. Yeah. So here we also speakers who come from different countries, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, yeah, none from Malaysia and Singapore, but they have actually adopted that particular interjection. So here you see S1 saying, they're talking about a piece of handicraft here actually, that somebody has brought, and it's in the form of a half of a watermelon, you know. So S1 is talking about that, and then S3, who's actually Thai, responds with a wa upon hearing how detailed the piece was, as even its tiny black seeds had been crafted, you know. So S3's use of wa here suggests that she's impressed and conveys her feelings of admiration. And then the extract below, they're talking about a research project and credit hours. S3 says research project, how many credit hours? And S2 says 42 credits. And S3 says 42 credits hours. Wow, so big. No? So here I think the expression here is, the use of wa here is to express how amazement and how big that assignment is. Okay, so then the next extract, they're talking about the population of a place. And then here again, there's a Vietnamese person responding with, again, the interjection wa, because she's saying wa because she's hearing how small the population of a place in question is. Yeah? And then the interjection is actually indicating surprise on his or her part, given that he or she is aware of the large number of tourists that they were talking about in the conversation earlier. Yeah. And in the last extract there, again, we've got the use of wa. S1 says, my friend is going to serve in the army, and S2 says, wa, Korean. And then S1 says, no, no, no. Then S2 says then, and S1 says friend in Guangzhou. So here you have S2 using interjection wa, suggesting delight upon hearing that S1's friend was joining the army. So this is particularly so since S2 appears to think that friend in question is a fellow Korean. So here we've got other examples to show that interjection, in this case, interjection wa, is also used in the English interaction of ASEAN speakers, people coming from different countries. The feature is not found in their own variety of English when they speak to one another. It's not found when they speak when they speak in their own countries. But when they come together with speakers from other countries in the region, then it has been found to be quite a common feature expressed by different speakers coming from different countries. So in conclusion, I would like to say that there's been quite a bit of work. I've talked about the growth and the of English in different national environments, and I've also talked about developing English in developing regional or ASEAN contexts. There's been quite a bit of study recently on that, on common features which are found in ASEAN ELF. So we can see that linguistic developments can either unite, actually they can distinguish different varieties of English in the region, as many studies have shown, because a lot of studies have looked at individual varieties of English, but developments have also shown that they can actually unite different varieties of English, such as we have seen in the Arabic layer, or when Chinese words are used, or when Malay words are used in the Englishes of different countries. So a regional ASEAN variety of English can be said to be emerging, and it's located at a more informal or spoken level. The spoken and less formal English, as you can see in all the examples, exploits a significant number of features of Southeast Asian languages with many sub-influences. And the local varieties have become members of multilingual language habitats, but also they show regional similarities as well. So we see regional similarities, especially when we've got perhaps a similar composition in terms of ethnicities in the population, or similarities in terms of religion. Yeah, and if you look at the language family, Southeast Asia's languages cluster in several broad language families, and therefore substrate influences may turn out to be regional rather than national. A lot of the work has been on national influence of national substrate influences, but influences may turn out to be regional rather than national. So I conclude by saying that features that transcend national boundaries serve to unite varieties of English under a common umbrella. And you can see that happening in actually research that's taking place recently in the data that we've collected on ASEAN ELF. Thank you very much.